Hey, so color grading is a little daunting. It's a little weird. Not a lot of people talk about what it is that they know or how it is that they get to the end result. We like to hide it in the shot. So in this video, I want to go over some of the client images that I've delivered in this last month, show you exactly what it is that I did to them, try to recreate them, and also, since we're on Capture One, we're also going to use Match Look and see if we can try to copy those adjustments in the same way without actually having to do them. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Sergio. I'm a commercial photographer here in Victoria, BC. I shoot primarily still life, advertising, food, things like that. And in this video, we're going to go over some color grading decisions that I made in this last month, show you exactly how it is that we can achieve a final result, because there's just a lot of sliders, there's a lot of things to do, and I am constantly telling you guys not to buy presets. So instead of buying presets, we're just going to learn together what it is that we got to do. When it comes to taking a raw file and making it into a JPEG, you got to make those decisions that the sensor is choosing not to do anymore. When you're shooting raw, it's giving you all that detail, so you have to make those decisions that a typical JPEG would otherwise be doing. If you're shooting in JPEG, it's crushing those details and it's telling you, oh, this is probably what you want, and you don't get a lot of leeway. But with a raw file, we can do a lot more. So very first shot here, we've got a shot from last month with Lowen. We are going to go from that to this. This is our final image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make sure that this shot ends up looking like the last shot. But one of the great things to do with color grading is to do it, stop, come back the next day, look at it again, and re-edit the shots again. Because there's so many sliders and things that you can do, it's easy to go too far sometimes, and it's easy to have like tired eyes and not really know what you're looking at. So coming back the next day and coming back with fresh set of eyes is usually a pretty good option. So we're gonna add a bit of contrast. We're gonna give it back a little bit of life in those shadows. Since it is food, I don't usually play with the saturation slider, but since it's food, we're gonna boost that a little bit. So now that our contrast is more or less set, we're gonna start playing with the colors. And when it comes to playing with colors and playing with split toning, you're like, where do I start? If you're not used to doing this, you really don't know where to start. So one of the great ways that you can learn to start is using the Adobe color wheels. So if we pull up color.adobe.com, we're gonna get this really nice color wheel that gives us an idea of what kind of colors pair well together. I know there's no real rules, you can do whatever it is that you want, but I remember when I was first starting out, when I was color grading shots, and I was realizing that, oh, my model had blonde hair, and I was using blue and pink highlights in the background with my gels. I was like, whoa, wait a second, why do these colors look so good together? Why does this work better than that work? It's not until I was shooting and not even knowing what it was that I was doing that I kind of fell onto color theory and realized that, oh my goodness, there is a reason why certain colors look better together, and it's a little bit more harmonious for the viewer. So if we pull up this page here, we can play with a few of the different ways that we can pair colors together. Very simply, you get like a little wedge, you can get a 180 wedge, or you can get a three-way on the color wheel. So triad, that's good. We get these three colors. Same with the intensity and the hue. That's what this goes with. And then analogous would be close together, that little wedge. And we can also do complementary, which would be those two. There's plenty of other ways to match and pair colors, but if we stick with those main three, or if we stick within any of these, you're almost guaranteed to get good looking colors. Playing around with this is a great way for you to set like, okay, well, I want my highlights to be about this color over here. So you go back into Capture One and you can go to your highlights and try to match that similar kind of color to try to get like a nice warm look to the highlights. One of the ways that I like to do this is I will always exaggerate the thing as well as much as possible first, so that I can actually see what's going on, and then we'll tone it way back down. So let's give it a little bit of warmth, a little love. And knowing what we know about split, complementary, we're going to take our shadows and we're going to push it all the way down here, and we're going to start creating a little bit more of a contrast within the colors. So there's contrast when it comes to highlight, which is really bright and really dark, but there's also contrast when it comes to colors, which would be complementary colors or things like that. Understanding how the colors play together can add more contrast to your shot, or remove some if that's what you're trying to do. So we're gonna tone down our shadow slider a little bit until we get something that looks okay. Same with this guy, a little cold for me. There we go, that's looking pretty good. And now we can go back through our colors here individually, and we're just going to start playing with each individual color. So one of the things that I want is I want a lot more green. I want a lot more saturation in the green. I want it to be very lively. I want to see the green. I want to see the basil. I think it's going to help pop the shot. Same with the yellow from the olive oil over here. We're going to make it pop a little bit more, and we're going to bring that lightness down so that it's a little bit more saturated so we can see the color even more. And now we're starting to get pretty good. So now when it comes to certain shots like this, like, yeah, I think I'd be pretty happy with this. Maybe it's a little cold, actually. Let's go back and warm this guy back up a bit. There we go. Now, if we take a look at this image, what we can do is we could be pretty much finished with it, but the beauty of Capture One and the beauty of many of these softwares, these editing softwares, is the ability to create layers. So if I add a layer here, now I can add a radial mask, and I can start adding some localized highlights and shadows that, sure, is kind of like cheating. They didn't actually happen in the shot, but because of modern day raw files and how much detail is still in there, we can still bring out a whole lot of detail that we don't already see. So what we can do here is this like little dark area. Oops, I'm just gonna invert that mask. This little dark area over here, we're gonna try to bring out some detail in the mushrooms. Add a bit of contrast. Boom. Boom. Now we're looking pretty good. Let's do another adjustment layer. We're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna add it on top of the pizza over here because Lowen himself is a little bit in the way of the flash, which makes a little shadow over the pizza, and that's kind of like the whole point of the shot. So let's make sure that this is nice and bright as well. The whole point of color grading, to me, is to just direct the viewer's eyes where you want them to be. You can shoot it a certain way, and you want to shoot it as close to your end result as possible. But a shoot like this, for me, like specifically for this shoot, we were just in their kitchen. He was actively just cooking pizzas, and I was just trying to shoot as much as possible and just being like, oh, wait, can you just aim for that again, and we'll take that shot. So we're trying. It's a little bit posed, but mostly candid. So there's going to be some errors that happen, or there's some things that can be a little bit more perfect if we do them in editing. So let's add a little bit of life back down here, like I was just saying. Give it some contrast. And this is why it's a little bit important as well to kind of go back with fresh eyes. Like I'm saying, you know, we're doing quite a bit of changes, drastic changes to the shot. And if you look at it again in an hour or in a day, you'll be like, whoa, what did I do? What did I do? Go back a little bit and tone everything down to 80% or whatever it may be. It's important to kind of go back at these shots and try them for a second time. All right, I'm relatively happy with that. I think that's pretty good. We can see how we started. So we went from that to this. And I'm curious to see, this is how I actually edited it. So let's have a look at what we just did versus how I delivered the shot to the client. I ended up making it quite a bit colder than but I love how the pizza looks, the final shot. All right, well, let's see. Let's see here. So this is what we just did. This is what we did what we gave to the client. And this is where we started. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up Match Look because we're here in Capture One and it's a awesome piece of software in order to be able to do this. And we're gonna drag just our final shot here in the reference image. And I'm going to go apply as a new layer just so we can apply it as a slider, as an opacity slider, and boom. That's what it thinks I did. So if we look at both shots, we pull them up here, we'll see that this is what I actually delivered to the client, and this is what Match Look just told me they thought I did. If I look at, actually, you know what? Now that I look at it, like, I think the colors here are closer than what we just did, which is fine. Like, that's fine. But I will say that it didn't get the localized adjustments, it seems like. There's definitely a lot more detail in these two radial masks, like where I put the radial mask, whereas in the Match Look version up here, you don't see that. It looks like it missed that. But it did get the colors right. It did get the overall contrast pretty damn good, and it got us there super quick. So one last time, this is what Match Look thinks it was, this is what we did, and then this is what we actually delivered to the client. So let's move on to the next shot. So over here, this is the raw file itself, and this is the final image that we delivered to our client here at Discovery Coffee. So one of the biggest things that I remember doing from this shoot was just basically changing the tealness of the blue to a more dark blue in the final image, literally just to match the company colors a little bit closer. So we were setting this up. We have I'll pop up a behind the scenes video of this shoot here. It's basically just 2-light setup, like my 2-light setup video. One's beamed right up to the top, adding some generalized fill to the scene because we were in an office building. And the second is just a key light shooting through one of my gobo reflectors and creating this shadow pattern that we placed all the food in the right spot and then poured the coffee, got a nice looking shot. So in order to edit this and to make it look like this, what we're going to do first, again, we're just going to make that raw file into a JPEG, which is just adding contrast, adding where you want the viewer to actually look on the frame. So if we have this shot over here now, is this the final shot? Wait, whoops, that's the final shot. So let's take up this one over here. One of the things that you'll notice too is there's a little bit of keystoning happening in this shot, or at least I fixed the keystoning in this shot as well. So what we're gonna do is do that. I do remember taking this shot, I had to be aimed down ever so slightly in order to get the composition right, but my camera lens is shifted down as well to try to get the perspective as close as possible. I do know I was a few degrees off and I was gonna correct those degrees in Capture One later, and now is later, so let's do that. If we pop open one of my favorite tools here, we'll grab the Keystone tool. Let's just pop it out because Capture One is great like that. So we'll pop it over here. Let's open up the sliders. And now what we can do is we can either go left to right or go up down, try to rectify those lines a little bit better. So that's what we're gonna do, is we're gonna bring the bottom up a little bit. There we go. And now if we look over here, this line should be relatively straight. There we go. That's probably pretty good. All right, we got almost. I think I went a bit too far. There we go. Let's fix a little bit of this way as well. One of the things that you want to pay attention to in the Keystone tool is to just know what lines should be straight according to where your camera's looking. I use a lot of the knowledge that I've built from shooting architecture and shooting interiors. Usually cabinetry is very straight, so you can line yourself up with cabinetry or things that are structural in the background. Obviously this is a box, so there's a little bit of leeway, and it's probably not going to be a perfectly straight line, even if, you know, in real life it's probably not even a perfectly straight line, especially down to the singular pixel level. So there's a bit of leeway here, but as long as it looks relatively straight, we're probably doing a pretty good job. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's move on. So now that the keystoning is relatively done, we're gonna start adding in our contrast again. We're gonna start making it a final image. So I usually start with contrast and I just work my way down. We're gonna add a little bit of, excuse me, got the hiccups. So we're gonna work our way a little bit down. We're gonna add a little bit of life in the shadows and then crush them back in the blacks. I feel like this way of doing it just gives me a little bit more control in the end result, in the details. I can actually put the depth of those shadows pretty much where I want them, especially if they were shot in this way. Next up, let's see, like I was saying, we gotta make that blue a little bit more navy, less teal, more navy. So we're just gonna open up over here. This is too teal, this is a little bit more navy. Same over here, we're gonna add this a little bit back. And in the next shot after this, we're just gonna go through a slightly more specific way of doing this kind of thing. This is a little bit more generalized because all of this blue over here needs to be a little bit more navy, a little bit less teal. So I can kind of generally just take all of the teal and make it navy and it'll be good enough. In the next shot, I'm gonna show you how we can just take a certain part of a certain color and adjust it to make it look like the rest of it. So there we go. We've got a lot of yellow here as well. I think I'm just gonna maybe desaturate it by half a stop, make it a little bit darker, add a little bit more contrast. Boom. Now, if we go back in our split toning, I don't think I need to add too much color variance to this because technically these were shot for Uber Eats and they don't want any of that stuff. So we're not going to add too much. We're not going to add any split toning there. But what we are going to do is we're going to come back to our radial mask. And I'm just going to add a little bit of life back here to the actual logo because, again, this is all about directing the viewer's eye where you want it. And if you want the viewer's eye to be looking at the logo or at the prime piece of food or at the subject's eyes, whatever it may be, that should be the brightest part of the frame because that's where your viewer naturally will be looking at. So if we open up this guy over here, I'm gonna invert the mask and just give it a little bit of life. Oops, it looks like it was already inverted. Give it a little bit of life here without going too far. There we go. Come back to the image layer, add a little bit of clarity. Boom. I'm pretty happy with that. Where did we start? There we go. So we went from this over here to this. So we just added a little bit of life, a little bit of contrast, a little bit of love. I don't want you to be too afraid to go too far, so to speak, because, again, you're adding details to a raw file. The raw file is on purposely flat. You want to put quite a bit of depth into those flat raw files. If you're not so sure about how to edit a raw file yet, it's a very good way to just shoot in RAW plus JPEG plus small JPEG so that you can just look at the file and be like, oh, that's what it thinks the general contrast could be. But it's not going to get the colors the way you want them. It's never going to get the white balance the way you want them. So that's why it's important to shoot raw. But even having just a JPEG to have an idea of what the scene looks like according to what your phone would look like or what have you, it's a good way to just have a little bit of practice, have it back and forth and be like, oh, this is what it should look like, not like this. So we started from this, we went our way to this, and I actually delivered this to the client, which is quite a bit darker, but that's how we went with it. Let's move on. All right, so finally it's gonna be this shot over here, and we started from this and we made our way to this. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna try to match the pink background to the pink on the actual subject, or on the product here. So the way that this was shot was to have a gel on the background and just lit relatively evenly across the background. Thing is though, my gels aren't the exact color of the product all the time. So we're gonna try to make those two a little bit closer together. So again, we're gonna start with just our contrast, just making that raw file into something that's a little bit more, closer to our end result. Give it that contrast back, give it a little bit of clarity, give it a little boost, give it a punch. Here we go. And just like that, in 2 seconds, we're adding, look how much more life we can add just like that. So now what we want to do is we want to make the pink on the origin, the actual logo, match the pink on the background. And the thing is, the pink on the background has multiple different shades of pink in it. It's not a completely even frame. If I had a slightly larger studio, if I had multiple lights on the background, giving it a nice even wash, maybe it would have been all the same color, but that's not how I shot this, and we're gonna have to fix it in post. So what we can do, and this is just going to be in the grading. So obviously what we can do in Photoshop is just select out, just paint the background a certain color and call it a day. But what I want to do instead is something that we can do in Lightroom, something you can do in Capture One, is just play with those localized colors and just train your eye to understand what it is that you're supposed to be seeing, what your end result should be. This is just practice. This is just stuff that we should be constantly doing to evolve our skills and train our eyes to see the right thing, really. All right, so if I open up the color editor over here, we're gonna open up the pink color or the red. There we go. So if we play with the pink, you notice that, okay, so let's just do an extreme color here. You notice that the bottom half has now shifted a more, pinkish color, and the top half is a little bit warmer. But if I bring it up here, now we're starting to match a little bit more, those two colors, a little bit more between the top and the bottom. The thing is that, it's close, but I think it could be even closer between this color and this color over here. So we're going to open up what they call the skin tone tool, which is really just a way to uniformize colors. Bring adjacent colors slightly closer together, which is exactly what we want to do for this shot. So I'm going to I'm going to press on the background, and it's going to give me that it's relatively this range that it's going to be affecting. So I can tell it to affect slightly less of the range or slightly more of the range, and keep adjusting layer by layer and telling, oh, make the purples a little bit more magenta, make the magentas a little bit more pink, make the pinks a little bit more, and I can keep playing with that. I keep fine tuning that, making it all a certain layer and add it all together. So like I just said, let's add that layer first before I forget it. I'll grab the color. We're going to go a little bit less smooth, so we only want to affect a certain part of the shot. And if we zoom out a little bit, we're going to add I'm going to change the hue a little bit, see where it's affecting. I'm going to give it a bit of life up top. All right, so we're getting a little bit better now. let's add another adjustment layer here. And now this time I'm going to click on the actual G, or I'm going to click on the logo itself, and we're going to get those colors to match. Now if you realize, this is a little bit more like 5 o'clock, and the other one was a little bit more 3 o'clock. So we have the ability now to just merge those two together. Just remembering where they were, let's just try to blend those two a little bit closer together. So we're going to bring the hue up a little bit, just so that it's closer. I think this one had to go down, actually, now that I think about it. Oh yeah, whoops. All right, I went the wrong way. All right, there we go, closer down. This one's closer up. Few points up, there we go. Now it's subtle, but we're able to start getting a little bit more of this color closer to this color. Now, one of the things that I would like to do, I might have to do this in Photoshop, but I do think that up here, there's a little bit less life than there is down here. And that makes sense because the flash was down here and there's less light that's hitting up top. So one of the things that we're gonna do here, we're gonna add another adjustment layer, and then we're gonna select from up here. And now if I select up here, you'll see that this is even more 3 o'clock than it was. So it was like 3, 4, and 5, let's say. So now we're going to take that 3 and we're going to bring it all the way back down again. So I'm going to make it a little bit less smooth. So I bring the hue down ever so slightly. We're going to bring the saturation quite a bit up. Yep, there we go, quite a bit. And maybe the lightness down ever so slightly, to try to get a bit of that life back. See how up here now we're starting to get a lot closer to, well, maybe not a lot closer, but quite a bit closer to the eye. And sure, this might be fine tuning, this might be nitpicking, you might not need to do this for every single shot, but I feel like if we have the ability to do it, it's nice to be able to do so. The fine-tuned, granular approach at color grading is really something that can make a shot look even more incredible. I realize when it comes to color grading, there's a lot that you can do. There's a lot of moods that you can create that didn't exist in the shot. But if you don't take your original images with the purpose of knowing how they're going to end up looking in the future, you're going to do yourself a disservice. There's a lot that you can do with editing, but that's not where the shot starts. It's not where the shot begins, and I don't want you to feel like you can use color grading to create your images. Color grading should be enhancing an already great shot, and it's important to have the knowledge on how you can create things in Photoshop, or have the ability to also do things in the color grading or on the computer side of photography as well as on the camera side. But great pictures start with a great picture. So don't feel like you have to know everything about color grading, or that if you don't know anything about color grading, then you're not gonna be able to be a good photographer or anything like that. It's more the opposite. Focus on getting it as close to us in camera as possible, and then use a little bit of the knowledge, a little bit of a few YouTube videos, things like that, in order to fine-tune that knowledge and make your images that much better. You're not gonna be a great photographer because you know how to edit. You're gonna be a great photographer because you know both. So focus on that, and that'll help you out. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe leave a like on your way out and subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you guys in a couple days. Later.